All right, good evening. I'd like to call to order the City of Edina Park Board meeting for Tuesday, May 13th, 2014. Let's start with the roll call, please. Janet?
Member Deeds? Here. Member Jacobson? Member Segreto? Here. Member Downing?
Here.
Member Steele? Here. Member Giesecke?
Here.
Member Sella? Here. Member McCormick?
Here.
Member Jones?
Here.
Member Green?
Here.
Member Johnson? Here. Member Good? Here.
All right, thank you, Janet. The next item on the agenda is approval of the meeting agenda. So is there a motion?
So move.
Second. All right, here in a second. Motion is what's that? Oh, I'm sorry. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? All right, motion approved. Moving to the next agenda item is the adoption of the consent agenda, and I believe we have an amendment.
I have a motion for an amendment on page 2, under 6C. I'd like to change. She then outlined the details of the proposed contract with the Wild. I'd like to change that to, she notified the board that there was a proposed contract with the Wild. And then that's following that, I keep the rest of that sentence the same, and then the next sentence I would like to change. She detailed the, delete the word detailed the, and put in she provided basic outlines of various remodeling projects, and then continue with that sentence.
All right, is there any further discussion on those two amendments? Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, so then we can, we have moved to adopt the consent agenda with those two amendments. Are you clear on those amendments, Janet? Yeah, okay. All right, then moving on to the, yes. On approval?
I second to approve the consent agenda.
Oh, okay. I thought we had one, but all right. So all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, so moved. All right, then moving on to the community comment section. Is there anyone that is prepared and would like to make a comment to the board tonight? Seeing no one, we can move on to the next section, which is the reports and recommendation section, and item A, the 9 Mile Creek Trail alignment through Bredesen Park, which is an action item. And I can lean on Ann to take it from here.
Thank you very much. We have with us this evening Eric Nelson from the Three Rivers Park District to go over the options that were presented previously at a meeting. And he is hoping for the park board to make a recommendation on one of the options. And so Eric will make a brief presentation, and then he and I will both be available for questions.
Thank you again for your time, park board members. As Ann said, I'm Eric Nelson with Three Rivers Park District, and I was here to see you at your April meeting and talk about the overall regional trail route through Edina. And we started to talk about some of the options for Bredesen Park and how the regional trail might work within Bredesen Park, and outlined a few options for the board, but we didn't really come to any conclusion at that time. And we've done a little bit more analysis of the alternatives, and in talking with Ann, we thought it best if I came again tonight to try to move forward with one of the options, so that when I'm here again in June for asking the board to approve the overall route, that everyone is comfortable with the route as it sits, especially within the park area. So just talk a little bit more about the options for Bredesen Park. Just a quick recap of where Bredesen is in the context of the overall route. The route comes across 169 on Londonderry Drive, through a wetland area, west of Walnut Drive, into Walnut Ridge Park, through another wetland area, crosses Vernon Avenue and runs down the east side of Gleason Road, and then into the park, and the park is here at this big letter C. From there, it crosses over a bridge over Highway 62 and onto the school campus on the south side of 62. This was option one.
Excuse me? How far away is it from Walnut Ridge Park, approximately?
I would say about a mile at most, half a mile to a mile. This was option one as we described it last time, and this option would have the new bridge over 62, that's this line, this thick orange line you see here, would come over Highway 62, then wrap around, go over 9 Mile Creek, and then come down and tie into the existing bike trail. And it would share the existing bike trail up until about this point right here, and then it would split off and be on a new alignment along the east side of Gleason Road. So the bike trail would continue on this yellow route here. The walking trail would run parallel. They would come together, go up onto the new bridge, and then there would be a fork in the bridge here where park trail users would come back down and tie back into the existing park trails, and regional trail users would, of course, go over the bridge. The pros to this option are that it minimizes impacts to the park. We're using an existing alignment, very little tree clearing, very little grading. The cons, or the main drawback would be that the trails right now are a one-way trail, and this would force either a portion of the trail, of the bike trail, to become two-way, or perhaps you look at making the entire trail system in Bredesen Park two-way. Here's a larger map of option one, just to provide the context of the overall park. The yellow segment here where the bike trail would have to become two-way, just showing that it's a relatively small section of the overall trail network within the park, and kind of illustrating where people coming into the park, how they might get to the new bridge. And as we get into our discussion, I thought this might be a good map to have. So if you'd like me to come back to this at any point, let me know. This is option two, and it was where a third trail would be created along the south side of the existing bike trail and run along parallel to the bike trail and come up to Gleason Road. We have made the decision to pull this option from consideration unless the board strongly objects. Last meeting, it seemed like no one really favored this option. And the reason we pulled it is because of the amount of grading and vegetation removal and impact it would have to the park to create essentially a third parallel trail. You would lose, if not all, a significant amount of the screening between the park and Highway 62 along the ramp. There'd be retaining walls. It seemed like an unnecessary impact to the park when other better options existed or exist. And then this was option three, and this was one where the bridge over 62 would be extended, the existing trail network would pass underneath the new bridge, and then a new alignment would be created through an upland area between two wetlands along this red line. There'd be an at-grade intersection with the walking trail and the bike trail here, a second pedestrian bridge over 9 Mile Creek here, and then new alignment along Gleason Road. Advantages to this, I would say, it allows the trail network in Bredesen to continue as it does today. Drawbacks, much more impact to the natural resources of Bredesen Park. There would be grading and tree clearing through here. I know last time one of the members asked me about how many trees. I guessed about 100. That was a decent guess. It's probably 100 to 150. We took a closer look at that. And so that's a summary of the two. So really, if it's acceptable to the board, the two options that are really up for consideration are options 1 and option 3. We, the Park District, prefer option 1, just that we feel like it's much less of an impact to the park, but we can certainly have that discussion. The other advantage to option one I forgot to mention was that we hear that there's flooding problems down near where the bike trail and walking trail cross 9 Mile Creek. So the trails, all the trail highlighted here in orange would be raised up under this option. So that would certainly help with flooding in this area as well. And here's just that same map, kind of the option on a larger scale. So that's all I had in terms of a presentation. And again, we're recommending option one. I believe staff is as well. Ann, you can speak to that. So I'll just take any questions. And
I just have a question on option one.
Sure.
Does the pedestrian, so if you stayed on the Bredesen Park Trail, is there any crossover with the bike, where the bikes will be, to get on either to the 9 Mile Creek Trail or if you're walking? Does that make sense? So like if you're walking, do you have any crossover over the bike trail?
If you're walking, you are sharing a path from about this point to where you come back down off the bridge. So within this orange area, that's a shared walking, biking, that's one path. But other than that, they're separated.
Okay, so it's shared, and if they wanted to go up over the bridge, they don't need to cross over the bike trail.
Correct.
Right? Okay. And then is there any separation at all with the pedestrian and the bike traffic on that section that's shared?
This section here, the walking trail is still intact from the end of the bridge through the rest of the park. So once people came to the end of the bridge, they could then split off and get back onto the walking path or choose the regional trail. The regional trail, we don't really distinguish between walking or biking, but the only time that bikers and walkers would be forced to share a common area would be the extents of this orange line here.
Okay, and so with that trail, is it any wider, or is it just the same as the normal bike trail?
It's wider. On bridges, it's 12 feet wide, and so that's 2 feet wider than the normal. And both your walking and biking trail are 8 feet wide now. We would make the segment of shared trail from here to here, we'd widen that to 10 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Do you foresee any safety issues with the bidirectional and the sharing of the space?
We don't. Our regional trails are all two-way traffic, 10 feet wide, mixed use of bikers, walkers, rollerblade, anything else that might be happening on trail. And especially when that parallel trail exists for people to walk on, we have no concerns with a shared path. It's what we have throughout our system. This intersection will take some careful design, but we think we can do that in a safe manner.
And you think, I'm assuming there's going to be rather significant signage saying that there is two-directional traffic. And there's actually two issues, and I don't know if you're prepared to talk about it or not, but one is if we like option 1, 2, or 3 as a park board, then also if we want to maintain, if we pick option 1, if we want to maintain, one direction or bi-directional path around the park. So.
Correct. And at this point in the game, we really only need approval of the route. In terms of deciding whether Bredesen becomes one-way or two-way, it's really just a signage issue for us, which we can design. We don't really need final plans done until this fall sometime. So if the board would like to consider that longer, that's okay with us. We just would like to get option 1 approved so that we know the alignment.
Granted. That's our primary purpose with this tonight.
Sure.
But we can also discuss it if we want to decide on the direction. We can do that as well. I think Ann would like some input and some direction on that. So.
Do you have any safety concerns about the two-way flow on so it's an 8-foot bike trail then? Or on the existing one?
The existing one is 8 feet wide. Do
you have any safety concerns about two-way traffic?
I don't, because of the parallel walking path. 8
Okay.
feet may get a little narrow for bikers and walkers and everyone else trying to coexist. But when you have that separate path for walkers,
Right.
we really feel that's adequate for two-way traffic.
Where are the restrooms on this map?
And I'll need your...
The restrooms are on the east side. Yeah, by the parking lot.
So that was
I'm not
my
seeing it.
first thought as far as the traffic flow, and thinking about, public restrooms and where the next stop is, and especially if you're biking with children. I think having that two-way, being able to get off the regional trail, go to the restroom, and then turn around and come back instead of having to go around the park, I think that would be valuable.
Another consideration Ann and I have talked about, and I forgot to mention, is that if it is a one-way trail and, say you're going anywhere east of this point, you would have to go all the way around the park to continue east on the regional trail. And I think I'm basically making the same point that you just did, but it does, two-way traffic within Bredesen does make things easier for coming and going on the regional trail.
The one thing I think we need to consider, though, is it's really heavily dense with trees, and it's very hard to see, and it kind of moves around. So when we were there over the weekend, I couldn't even see my daughter when she was maybe 20 feet ahead of me. So that kind of scared me if there was another person riding their bike coming the other direction. So we should just pay careful attention to that and make sure the visibility is okay.
And I completely agree with that. And the one thing that we talked about internally, I talked about with our engineering director and our public works director, is that in areas where there is limited visibility or there are turns, we might want to put a stripe on the path itself to really delineate the directions. So that would help. It wouldn't alleviate your concern, but I think it would help.
I think you're going to do it all the way around. If you're going two-way, I think you need to strike the whole time. And you may want to try and post some level of speed limit, because you get the folks that are serious bikers cruising on that thing 30 miles an hour, and you've got kids mixed in going the opposite direction. That actually is hazardous, and it's only an 8 foot wide. It's only an 8 foot wide with if you get 2 or 3 or 4 people passing and going different directions at fair speed, you're going to need to mark it out. You're just going to have to put that in the budget. You're going to need to line that thing and keep it lined.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you had somebody passing, you could have a pretty bad accident. And I noticed just a lot of families there with their kids on little bikes, and so it looks like it's a very family-oriented park.
Would it make sense to widen out the whole trail to 10 feet wide instead of 8 feet wide for the existing parts?
We could explore it. I was not involved in that initial trail design. I'm guessing that it would not be an easy or an inexpensive project, and there would likely be a significant amount of environmental impact as well.
I just wonder about with the safety. It's like if that would alleviate some of the safety issues, then maybe it'd be worth it.
You know, we have done quite a bit of research, and a two-way 8-foot trail is perfectly acceptable. It is standard, but where I think we do have a little bit of a unique situation is the twists and turns in the trail that make it more complicated.
I think that as a bike rider, the twists and turns are somewhat self-limiting. You know, you can't go full-out speed when you're encountering curves. One of the things, there's going to be a transition period because the bike trail there has been one way for so long that people, it's ingrained in their brains that it's going counterclockwise, you know, so signage is critical. I don't know. I'd be real sensitive about increasing to 10 feet just because of the environmental impact. There's so few places in Edina where you could take a stroll and be in nature that I think you raise some issues with nature lovers.
So can you speak to the slope as the bridge hits the trail? And I'm just wondering about how fast bike riders might be going as they enter the park from the south.
Sure. The slope will be limited to 5%, and that is in order for the bridge to be ADA compliant. I'm not really sure how to put that into context, but it's, it will have a steep grade, but we'll just have to sign it and stripe it, and the bridge will be designed with a railing such that you can see people approaching from either direction on the park trail. And the point was well made in that curves, we find that curves tend to slow people down naturally. We have our most issues with grade on straightaways where you can build up speed. We find that sometimes situations like this tend to just slow people down naturally. So there will be gradient coming off a bridge, there's no doubt about that. It's limited to 5%, which we find generally tends to be a grade where people can stay under control unless they're riding carelessly.
And have you gotten advice from any of the other boards, or the Bike Edina Task Force, on how they have viewed this?
We've presented the route to the Transportation Commission and to the Edina School District, and they are in favor of the route. They like that the bridge is here and not up right at Gleason Road as was considered. The mechanics of how Bredesen Park works, we haven't really got into, and I think it's just assumed that that's the park's jurisdiction to figure out how you want to do it. You know, we'll have our 10-foot two-way paved trail that we'll have everywhere else. So,
yeah, I understand what you're asking us, and I agree. As a board, or the park district is going to have to figure out how to handle the rest of it, and so I understand how this might be. Do you normally build spurs, like for example, if we wanted to connect from the bridge, make that connection longer, that it might connect toward the street. What's the street over on the right?
One I'm pointing to?
Yeah, the one you're pointing at right now.
I'm not sure of the name, but I don't know if that matters.
You don't that's not something that Three Rivers normally does?
It's not something that we normally fund. You know, on a project like this, we would cooperate, and usually the other agency would fund that portion, and we would fund the regional trail.
Looking at it and thinking about it, minimizing impact on option one makes sense, but I do think that we're going to have to consider that if option one's going through, I don't see a way of keeping it one way. I think it just doesn't make any sense at that point. So the selection of option one and the support of option one, we might as well, at least in my mind, means we're going with two-way traffic on the bike path.
What would be your opinion there, Member Deeds or anyone else? If do you think we need to have the entirety of the trail two-way, or can we just have the southeast quadrant where people would maybe want to cheat and go against the direction if it wasn't two-directional, or if it's to the restrooms, just make that two-way?
Yeah, I think it just gets too confusing. I think you're either going, it's either one way or it's two-way, and having a small section that going the other direction means that people are going to be forcing the issue to go in the other direction. I think you have to stripe it. I think you have to paint the bikes and the arrows all over down the path and really lay it out. Then I think that's something that the staff will have to take on, doing all of this just for safety's sake, because you got a real mixed use on there between 4-year-olds barely on their bikes and 25-year-old serious bikers cruising through that park. And so it's going to require good signage and good striping. And I'm not talking just in this little area. You're going to have to stripe the whole thing. I just don't see any other way that it can function.
How long does bike trail striping last?
From our experience, on average, I would say 5 to 7 years, depending on quality of installation and weather and other factors. 5 years, I would say, is a decent assumption.
Are those with plowed trails?
We have both, and I think it doesn't seem to matter whether it's plowed or not.
I think I agree with David. I think it might be worth it, and then reassess striping it again. But just it's a very straightforward educational method. And
I agree that if we went with option one and we didn't, as you suggested, Kia, make it so that people can get to the restrooms off that trail, I could see that little small section leaving that two-way and everything else one-way. But once you're saying we've got to make it two-way for people to get off and go that far, once you've gone that far, then it's silly to think that we can keep it one-way. So I think option one, if we take it, it has to be two-way around the entire park.
I, for the most part, agree, two-way traffic all around. But reluctantly, are there different striping schemes so that you can minimize the visual impact of the stripes? There's nothing worse than taking a walk in the park and yellow stripes hitting you in the face. I mean, can they be a little bit more subdued?
One thing that we have on other regional trails, as both, for more so it's clarity of route, but it may achieve your end as well, is that regional trails are striped yellow and connections are striped with green. If a green stripe is more pleasant, I guess that's subjective, but we have that on other trails, and it helps users know regional trail is this way, local trail is that way, but it may be less visually prominent as well.
I think that would help.
Just as also as a biker, I would have to say that if this was option one and we did not stripe it and have the entire park two-way traffic, it would be very confusing for the bikers. There's no question. I think just from a safety perspective, it would be so much easier if we knew as we're biking through, it's going to be two-way traffic through the whole time. Then we have less to worry about. And then also when we do get to intersections where we're crossing with pedestrians, and we know that it's two-way, they also, as they're crossing, you kind of know which direction somebody might be coming from, just to be safe as a biker.
This is an action item, and we've got one vote for sure and maybe two, David, on the two different issues. Is there anyone we haven't had a lot of discussion, is there anyone in favor of saying this is only 2% of this trail and let's, maybe we don't want to stripe it. Maybe we don't want to make it both directions except for where it's necessitated here.
I don't know if we need to decide on those details right now. I think that there's some surveying that still is taking place of the bikers. Is that right?
We finished the surveying that we wanted to do prior to the park board meeting. We actually hoped to do more surveying, but unfortunately the weather didn't cooperate. And the days that we were out there, we had very few bikers that were out. So most of the surveying was done with walkers. So if the park board would like, we could certainly survey some more at some more times and try to get some more bikers.
And the reason that I'd suggest that is I think that the area of impact is just this southern end of the park. And I don't know... It could be quite easy to keep the current paths as they are, and then for the cost of expanding and or upkeeping, we could maybe make a spur or a couple spurs connecting the regional trail to either roads or our paths, but maintaining the one-way flow of the park, but expanding perhaps a trail system on the south. Can you guys visualize what I'm talking about?
That's going to entail tree removal and, you know, that's going to entail some pretty substantial environmental impact if you're talking about running. I mean, if you're talking about going out, okay, the restrooms are over there where the parking lot is, and if you're talking about heading out that direction to get to the nearest street, there's going to be substantial work to do that, and there's going to be substantial tree removal that's going to be involved in environmental impact then.
I think we still need to decide if we think it's important that this is access to the bathrooms. Like, I don't know that you'd be on that trail and think, oh, I need to go find the restroom at this park. I'm not sure how the rest of the trail works and what type of availability there is for restrooms. So,
Just one.
I mean, on the trail, on your 9 Mile Creek Trail.
Walnut
Yeah,
Ridge would be the next stop, right?
right. At
What
this
about
point,
before? Sorry, what about before from the other end? I mean, it would be the schools, right?
But they're not open in the summer
Exactly.
to people to go in.
So then what's the next public park or whatever before the school?
from the east, I would imagine that would be.
I would almost think you'd have to get all the way over to the Fred Richards,
Yeah, I was just going
Centennial
to
Lakes
say
area.
That's quite a haul.
And also from my perspective too, as I mentioned in the staff report, I didn't even think of the bathroom issue, which I think is a very good point. My concern was cyclists coming from the east side, specifically the southeast side, maybe wanting to get across the highway to school, or maybe just wanting to get on the trail. Are they going to want to ride 2/3 or 3/4 of the way around the Bredesen Park Trail, or are they going to say, I'm just going to take the shortcut and take the shortest route to get there? And then we're going to be creating an unsafe environment as well.
Mm-hmm.
So do we want to vote on between the three options first and settle on that, and then see if we need to make our decisions about which way it goes? And
I think
later?
so. We'll have two votes. Are we done with the discussion on item number one on what option? I think from what I'm sensing, it's option one, so we can get a motion. Is there a motion to approve option one?
I make a motion to approve option one for the alignment of the 9 Mile Creek Bike Trail.
I second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion passes for option one. And then we can have a second vote here. I think we're ready as to, let's let someone make a motion as to what they'd like to say.
I move making the Bredesen Park Bike Trail two-way traffic flow with striping, at least for the first. Yes.
For two-directional traffic.
Correct.
All right, there's a second. So let's have a vote. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? All right, there's none. So motion passes. There we have a decision on both of those.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it.
See you next month.
All right, so let's look back at the agenda, and moving on to the next item is item B, request for proposal for park system master plan. And Ann, I'm assuming you have some comments there.
Thank you very much. I have before you a draft request for proposal for a park system master plan. As you all know, this is something that we've been talking about for over a year and a half, and I apologize for not getting it to you sooner. We've been very busy, and so I have a draft RFP for you this evening, and I'm interested in any feedback that you might have, whether it is good, whether you recommend some changes, or whether you recommend that this goes back to our committee for further discussion and review. I was just hoping to kick off this discussion so that we could get this master planning process started.
All right, I have some questions. Well, first of all, this is great. It's evolved so much since we've been talking about it. So there are a lot of things I really like about it that, we haven't even talked about that have evolved. So thank you. I just have a couple questions about things I'm not seeing in here, and I'm sure you have reasoning, but it doesn't talk a lot about like programming or like budget or CIP, and I'm just wondering if you can talk about those and what you envision the consultant doing with those items, and or if they fall under another bullet point that I'm not.
As far as the budgeting and CIP, my thoughts are that this master plan would provide a very detailed and prioritized schedule for improvements in the park system. You're right, I didn't specifically call out any programming, and we could certainly add that. In my mind, programming would be certainly a component that would have to be discussed for all options in all of our parks. So definitely.
I think, and I don't know the difference between what you need to spell out in here and what you need to tell the consultant, but I did look up the comprehensive plan, chapter 9, and it does the section, it's 9.3 is trends and challenges, and it does spell out some of those items, so maybe it would be worthwhile to like sub-bullet some of those points. Like it has, I think it has like a policy on the CIP, and it has a recreation programs and services plan. Maybe just a couple items to mention that you're particularly interested in, so that, because this is seems very facility heavy, and so, and then the other thing is the survey. Is there going to be a survey?
For the budget amount that we have, I was not planning on a community survey. I thought that we would utilize the community surveys that have taken place recently, and I anticipated that our consultants would do a very extensive public engagement process. So, but if the board would like a more detailed survey, that certainly is something that we could consider as well.
So again, the chapter 9 of the comprehensive plan has like a section on the survey that was done in 2006. So maybe if you just looked at that and see if there's any data that would be helpful to gather, because that really seemed to set the framework for that chapter in the past. So I'm not saying that it's absolutely necessary to do a survey, but just want to make sure we're getting everything we need.
What's the outcome that you're hoping for? As I read through it, there's a lot of disparate pieces in here. What's the outcome you're hoping for?
I am hoping for a plan that will guide the park system for the next 20 to 40 years. I would hope that it would help us to prioritize and budget what improvements we will make in our parks. I'm hoping that it will help us to identify trends and potential areas that we're missing in our park system. Certainly, I would like to find out from the residents what they feel that we're missing. I would like to address the needs of our athletic associations to see if we can meet the needs that they have that we're not currently addressing. But I want to compare what we have to other park systems and park districts to meet the very highest standards.
And is the role for the consultant
I guess in my mind, I see both. I see them help to facilitate the data gathering and public engagement process. And I see the park board and the committee for the master plan certainly guiding and directing the facilitator or the consultant toward an end goal of a plan.
How did you come to 12 months of work time?
I asked a couple of consultants how long they thought it would take.
And so if that puts you to mid-20, if it goes out in June, awarded in June, so it's mid-2015, where's the CIP cycle? Or have we missed that already and we have to get up for 16, or how do you
Yes,
that?
Unfortunately, the timing for that isn't great. This year is a CIP year, and we do the CIP for 2 years.
Okay.
So we'll be a year off.
So I have a question with respect to the enterprise facilities being excluded from this. And I know that we're going to be reviewing, part of our work plan is that we were going to be talking about those enterprise facilities. And I'm just wondering how you think that those two goals are addressed with this process.
In my mind, the facilities were eliminated because we've already done studies of several of our enterprise facilities in terms of operational efficiencies, and we will continue with those studies and continue moving forward with those improvements. I think it's important that we include them in terms of what we're offering at those facilities in terms of programming and amenities and facility inventories. And I certainly hope that we will continue to study those enterprise facilities, both in terms of the cost recovery percentages that is on the Park Board work plan, and in terms of a review of business plans going forward for our enterprise operations. So I kind of felt like those facilities are a little bit more set in their missions. So I thought it was more important to include them in the inventory.
Right, but we have in the past talked about possibly reclassifying, and that's also part of that work plan. So I'm just wondering if that, as we figure out when the order of things, to do a full, before we assume that these will always be enterprise facilities, to say, let's make sure that we want to have these all as enterprise, and if we don't, then they should be part of a long-term master plan.
Sure, absolutely. No, that's a good point. And in terms of a facility like Centennial Lakes, for example, we would have a very good inventory of facilities, inventory of programming to go along with that, and it would be a really great opportunity for the Park Board then to weigh in on an issue like that.
I have a quick question about, so it sounds like from an RFP perspective that some of the questions we're having is around time frame. Just, we're thinking it's about 12 months out. Sort of the goals and objectives that you have in the very beginning for whoever we choose, as well as for us to understand kind of what it is that we're doing. But I guess one last thing I'd like to probably see in an RFP is how are we going to measure success at the end of this, at the end of 12 months? How do we know that we've actually hit that effectively and we were able to put a flag in the ground and say, yeah, we did the right thing? And it strikes me that there might be a couple of ways of looking at that we're looking at public opinion based on the survey results that came in from the 2006 survey, as well as maybe how people are feeling about the feedback that we're getting. It could be around budget and maybe around timing, but just how do we know that we did the right thing with regards to the consultant we chose?
That's a great comment. have to figure out, have a set of criteria to determine.
I have another question of, we also have in front of us, although just for information, the Fred Richards reuse study. And that would be looking at how we're going to reuse and repurpose a major portion of green space in the city. And I note that the dates given for that show that it would be coming to the park board for review and recommendation in October of this year. And so how does approving something like that in October fit in with doing a comprehensive master plan that we look at, not really getting results for 12 months out? I have a feeling in October we're all going to feel a little uncomfortable knowing whether or not that's going to fit into a master plan that we're also spending time and effort to look at.
Certainly, we are doing a lot of projects concurrently. We're doing it with this master plan and the Fred Richards repurpose. We're also doing the same thing at the golf course. We have a lot of projects going on. It might not be an ideal scenario, but I think with the timeframes that we're given, we'll just have to make the best. Honestly, I wish I had a better answer for you, but those are the timeframes that I've been given in which to operate.
I don't mean to jump the gun, but what does the public input process look like for that? What are people talking about as far as the specifics for that?
For the Fred Richards repurpose? Yeah. We will have a very extensive public engagement process starting on June 12th. Actually, we'll be having public meetings. We'll be having visits out at the site, a variety of different public engagement techniques, specifically to engage residents that live in that neighborhood and residents throughout the entire city. We're going to try to hold a variety of different meetings in different locations, different times of day, to try to engage as many people as possible. So the exact number and type of meetings are yet to be determined. Our first meeting to kick off that entire process is going to take place on June 2nd.
And I think that's all good. These different projects have these public input process, and I prioritize this master plan over any individual project, and I hope that the public input process for this project is more comprehensive and more time and money is invested to this project than the other ones. And I know, like Grandview, a lot of dollars have been spent, and there's a lot of energy being put towards that. And so, you know, that's where, when talking about the survey, that's where I get a little hesitant, because I think this is a good place to spend money and, you know, look at bigger issues than one specific project.
And I completely agree with you. I think the public engagement process with this is critical. And to me, that is going to be a really key factor in the selection of a facilitator. And I know that that is something that, as we do interviews, I think we need to really emphasize and figure out a firm's process and how they would do it and the extent at which they value that public engagement process.
So what I'm hearing is, though, that it might be worthwhile if the subcommittee that was working on this, that to my knowledge, the subcommittee didn't have any part in developing these, right? So maybe we could meet and try to come up with some of the answers. You know, number one, what are we really trying to achieve with this? Maybe we can find out whether or not this really is the total amount of budget we will have, or we would have more of a budget to provide a real needs assessment and a real survey. And or if this is the budget, then what do we think we can achieve with this amount of money?
Absolutely. I'm very open to that. my goal in starting this discussion tonight was to start the discussion. So I'm happy to follow through however you would like to move this forward.
I have a question on all of this, and this gets back to my lack of really understanding the particular relationship. The ECC is not listed as part of this, and I know that is the school districts, I believe, but it is the community center, and it is the only gyms of any size that we have. It doesn't make sense to me that it is excluded from a parks plan. I mean, I know there's turf issues here, but if we're talking about the amenities, if we're talking about a plan for the amenities, the park and recreation amenities of Edina, the idea that several of these things that are part of it but not part of it are excluded from the plan doesn't make a lot of sense, to be honest. It's one of the major facilities used for recreation by all of the various youth leagues and clubs and everything else. And we don't have another facility to supplant it or to substitute for it. So I just think that in some way, shape, or form this has to be considered within the broader strategic plan, or there's a big gap in what we're looking at.
Have you looked at the community centers? I don't know if it's the community centers, but the strategic plan for community education. Don't they have a current one? And I know I just went to the meeting, and they're starting their strategic planning process again this year. And correct me if I'm wrong, but whether it's taking a look at what they've already done and seeing, what's missing and what we could benefit from, or partnering in some way, collecting data or analyzing data so that it benefits both your strategic plans and appears in both the documents. That might be a conversation, but my understanding is they were going to start in like 2 months with that process.
They are doing strategic planning for community education, but community education is different from the community center and different from facilities, because most of the facilities I think that you're thinking of, David, would be gyms and fields that are part of schools, and that's not really part of community education. That wouldn't be part of that strategic planning process.
And we do have a very detailed inventory already of all of those types of facilities within the city. We completed that as part of the Sports Dome study.
But as in terms of the other, thinking about needs and a needs assessment, are you proposing that we just not do that?
I am proposing that we don't do a significant needs assessment study like was done in 2006. In having a conversation internally with the staff, we feel that a lot of studies have been done very recently in terms of Grandview and in terms of the decision resources study. Again, that's just my opinion. And the opinion of some other staff members, but if the park board would like that to be a major component as part of the study, we can certainly consider that.
Do you feel that the issues that came up, I mean, the big one was the walking trails or the bike trails in the 2006, do you feel those issues have all kind of been taken care of or addressed? Even, I mean, we're not getting a bike trail for a little while, but do you feel that we've addressed those issues?
I think we're working to address those issues, but I think we're far from being done with those issues, and that is something that I certainly want to address very heavily with this master plan in terms of trails, sidewalks, connectivity between parks, connectivity within amenities within parks. No, I think we actually have quite a long ways to go on the trails.
I guess my only comment is I would welcome community outreach like you're proposing versus more surveys, because the surveys are flawed by the fact that they call people who live at homes that answer phones versus kids in adults who might be sitting in the park and didn't answer the phone. So I think that would be a real benefit to really go to outreach in parks and ask people what they want for people who are in the parks.
I agree. I think that's, and then you have more reliable data from different angles. Yep.
I think I like Ellen's idea. I think since we already have a subcommittee that met a few times regarding master planning, why don't we reconvene and take a look at the draft and come back to the park board with some comments for you to consider.
Is that an issue, Ann, with delaying the process another month?
Not at all.
No?
I guess I don't see how specifics at this point. I'm not hearing any specific point that would change the application, the applications that we receive. So I'm kind of, I think, yes, we need to continue to meet and continue to refine what we want, but the consultant will listen to that. And so I feel like it's not going to change the application process. So I kind of don't want to delay it, but.
Yeah, I was thinking those same things, Kia, because I'd like to get moving on it. Things will evolve over time. There's a lot more to this process than 3 or 4 sheets of paper, and it's going to be evolving. I would like to get something scheduled with the group that's going to work on it, and have further discussion and get that moving, that process as well. So.
One other comment that I might make to Kia's point is that if we put the RFP out there, we can learn a lot from the people that are interviewing with us, the different facilitators, and whatever we put in the RFP, we're not locked into. We can certainly add items, we can change items, we can revise before we do a final contract with any vendor. So this is putting an idea, many ideas, giving a consultant suggestions as to what we might be looking for in this master plan, but it is not at all set in stone.
But I think if we narrow the scope of work so that we more carefully listen to what the consultants have to say, we'll be able to key in more on which consultant can better deliver the products we're expecting.
I was also going to add to that a little bit, and just going back to the idea of the objectives, and being just as someone who's replied to RFPs in the past as a consultant, I'll tell you it's a lot easier to really have a very clear-cut set of goals and objectives and what we're trying to do in a time frame, and maybe a little bit more narrowed scope, so that what they can reply to will be useful for us, and kind of apples to apples to make that comparison.
Just one layout suggestion. I'd try and take these points and organize them somehow. Some of them are strategic in planning. Some of them are very process and, things like inventory and pavement management plan, prepare project base maps. There's some very concrete things that are operational in nature, and some, if I was looking at this as bidding on it, I'd put a lot of time in having to tear it apart to try and figure out what the heck I'm going to want to do with it. So I think if you organize the bullet points into more categories that kind of lay out, if you can figure out the 2 or 3 kind of categories of things you're looking for from them, and then put the bullet points in underneath that, I think you'll get better responses, and they'll have a better idea of what you're looking for.
But I agree that we should meet as a subcommittee. I think there's a lot more to identify in terms of what is it that we're trying to accomplish here. What are the problems that we're trying to meet, and or what is it? Is it a master plan? Is it a strategic plan? And or what are the answers that we're going to get from the consultants? And I also think that there are a lot of open issues right now that we can't imagine that they'll be able to address for us if we don't identify what those open issues are and speak to them somehow, which would be, will there be a community building at Grandview? According to the framework, that's what there will be. So where does that fit into this planning process, and what are the questions we're going to be asking the consultants with respect to some kind of a indoor community center at Grandview? What is going to happen at Fred Richards? That's an open question, and how can we expect a consultant to prepare a strategic plan when these are two really huge issues? And then also on our agenda, we also have a discussion of Arneson Acres. I mean, these are big pieces of property within the city, and I think as a board we need to really figure out how we want to identify that in this RFP.
But don't we have to be also realistic that the budget for this is what, $60,000? I mean, how far is $60,000 going to be if we keep expanding, what we're doing? But I agree, every item that you just suggested has to be looked at and answers gotten. I mean, I agree. But let's be realistic about what this strategic plan is going to cost.
Or just more definite about what we're expecting.
But I don't think you can, it does say identify needs, trends, strengths, and weaknesses. I don't think for the purposes of RFP you have to list out what you foresee your opportunities and weaknesses being. I think, on one end I'm hearing that we need to kind of make this more concise and easier to read. But then these are more specific projects, and I think that we can meet as a group and decide how we want those things to be addressed. But for the purposes of this document, it needs to be concise and flow.
Well, I think part of the problem is you've got things that are very down in the weeds, like developing a graphic plan and review of park operations and maintenance and recommendation for procedure. There's a lot of very down in the weeds, very specific stuff, and then there's stuff up here. And if we're talking about a strategic plan, it's more of the stuff up here that we should be having them focus on and trying to give us and help us understand what successful, and long-term successful inner ring burbs are doing and how they're maintaining that position. Versus having them focus on a maintenance plan for trails and parking lots and basketball courts. So we've got a lot of little detail stuff down here, and kind of very specific kinds of stuff down here. And I think, given my experience, my guess is that's what they'll glom onto because that's easy. And very concrete, and you'll get nice detailed plans on stuff like this, and you'll get Dilbert's buzzword bingo at the high level stuff, and not anything that's particularly actionable. And I'd rather pin them down and have something well drafted and focused that's really about providing peer and a lot of information on peer and aspirational communities and where they're going and what they're doing. And providing us an understanding of where we fit and looking at models and trying to understand where we want to go that will guide our decision making, because there's a lot of decisions that are going to have to be made that are not going to be in this plan, are never going to be in this plan, and there's a gazillion things that can come up in the next 18 months that aren't going to be in this plan. What we need, in my opinion, out of a plan and if we're going to engage a consultant, what we need out of them is for them to help us understand and come together as a community and say, this is what we want to look like. This is where we want to go. I don't care whether they know how to do maintenance on tennis courts or not. I really don't. That's not what I'm looking to engage.
One of the things that might help then from an objectives and goals perspective is are we looking to develop an approach to a plan? Is this the approach that we're really looking for? Because everybody here has ideas on what needs to be taking place from that perspective. But if our goal from this consulting group is to come back with, here's how we're going to approach towards a strategic plan, and for $60,000, that seems pretty reasonable, to expect them to be able to come up with that. And underneath that, then we say, okay, from a strategic perspective and the plan itself, this is what we need to be focusing on from an implementation perspective, from an operations perspective, from a maintenance perspective. But it sounds to me, and I'm maybe off, is that we really need guidance on what that approach is going to be in order to get there. Because unless I'm off, it strikes me that we're all sort of talking slightly differently on what our expectations are.
You know, I'm concerned about the expectations of spending $60,000 for 200 or 300 hours of consultant work and getting something that's actually actionable and worthwhile. Honestly, I think the money's better spent elsewhere, or save it for next year and spend 120 and get it done right.
Yeah, I think, and it's, you know, I applaud Anne for pushing this forward, but I think when other departments of the city are spending more money on, you know, surveys and public input and all different plans, I feel like this is very important, and so I wish adequate time and money was spent on this project.
I actually have $90,000 for this project. We had 60 that was allocated. I knew 60 wasn't going to be enough, so I held back one other CIP project from the department last year for another 30. So we have a total of 90.
So I think I would like to reiterate, I'd like to meet as a subcommittee and talk this through. Should I make a motion on that?
Sure. I think we're split on whether we need to do, I think we all understand that needs to happen and happen soon, but whether it needs to happen before, you know, is this enough for the RFP to go forward, or do you want to meet before that? So.
Right. So what I would be proposing is that because there is there are a lot of unanswered questions at this meeting, and I think that in order to refine those, what should be in an RFP and what might not be affordable or part of a $60,000 or $90,000 project, I'd like to propose that the subcommittee meet and come back next month with a proposed new RFP.
Is there a second?
Second.
What I would propose before we meet is that, no offense, Anne, that this is flushed out and edited very carefully so that there's no, so it's not as, so that the points are as broad and as possible. For example, it says identify needs, strengths, and weaknesses and opportunities of our park facilities and locations. And the next bullet point is identify opportunities to incorporate public art into the park system. So wrap those two together and maybe say identify strengths, needs, trends, weaknesses, opportunities for park and recreation and arts, or something like that. And so you're trying to tighten up each of those bullet points, because if this isn't tightened up and we go to discuss it, it's going to be that much harder. And then also, like David said, maybe prioritizing them so that the big issues are at the top, and maybe the smaller things that the committee is not, you know, we, at the end of the day, if money is an issue, we're not as, don't care about it as much, put those towards the bottom. But I think that would save a lot of time.
And do we have record who's on this committee for the planning group? And do we have a chair for that group? For the committee for the master plan?
Do we have a chair for that group? I don't think we do.
What?
Have a chair for the committee?
No, you guys always want to be in the middle of the morning, you know, cracking dawn. I don't think anybody was awake enough to do that.
All right. Well, that's something to consider as well, because I think we're going to need some central decision-making and some guidance along this process. It's pretty clear. So, Ellen, would you like to restate your motion, incorporating whatever you would with the other statements, and then we'll go from there?
Month and come back and report to the board next month
All right, preferably with an actionable
with an actionable, proposed.
proposal. Okay.
I second.
We have a second. All right. So let's take a vote on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, motion carries. So if, and maybe that's something we can put together sooner rather than later to contact the group and put a meeting together.
I'll try to get something scheduled next week.
That'd be super. Okay. All right. That's enough for that item. Let's move on to the Braemar Golf Course Master Plan Task Force, which is another action item. And Andy, you have a few words to say about that?
I do, thank you. At the April 22nd City Council meeting, there was a motion to approve a Braemar Golf Course Master Plan and Stormwater Master Plan process, utilize the staff suggested process 2, which includes a task force selecting a master plan consultant and directing the process. And so what I am asking for this evening is for the Park Board to appoint 2 members to the Braemar Master Plan Task Force. The other 5 members of the Braemar Master Plan Task Force will be selected by the City Council. We have opened and advertised an application on our website. It's an application similar to what we use for boards and commission positions. That application process will be open through May 21st. After May 21st, staff and the City Council will review the applicants for those remaining 5 positions, and the City Council will select the remaining 5 members of that task force. So the task force, as it stands, will be a total of 7 people, 2 self-appointed by the Park Board. So I'm happy to answer any other questions, if you have any, about the master planning process. One thing that I guess I would like to add is that we're hoping that the rest of the task force will be appointed either at the end of June or the beginning of July. So we would expect the master planning process with the start of an RFP, that task force will help prepare, will take place starting in July.
All right. Is there any further questions or concerns? I guess we're looking for a couple of folks to step forward and kind of self-appoint.
I'd be happy to do it.
Yes. All right. Thank you. That's one. All right. All right. So there we have 2 folks stepping forwards, Member McCormick and Member Deeds. So those are the 2 we're looking for. Anyone else have an interest? Or else we can go forward. And I guess I'll make the motion to appoint those 2. And need a second.
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 All right. All in favor? All right. All opposed? All right. Motion passes. Thank you, you 2. All right. Next agenda item is the Fred Richards reuse study, which is informational in nature, and Ann is going to do a brief presentation for us here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have just a quick presentation for you this evening. I wanted to fill you in on the Fred Richards reuse process that the City Council approved at the end of April. And so just to go through a few items that occurred, on March 18th, the City Council made a motion to start a master plan for redevelopment of the Fred Richards Golf Course with funding from 2013 undesignated funds and with involvement by residents, the park board, and city officials. And that motion passed, and City Manager Neal stated that staff would present a description of a recommended process to council within 30 days. So as you see, that took place on March 18th, so we had a month then to make a recommendation to the City Council, which we did on April 22nd. So what we recommended to the City Council was that we have a public process that's open and inclusive to all residents. It would include public meetings, open houses, site walks, and workshops. That the process would be civil and respectful of all concerns. That it would be timeline sensitive, as you mentioned earlier, with a deadline of the end of October to have a process completed. It would provide review and recommendation from the park board, and it would receive final approval from the City Council. Some of the design parameters that we outlined was that it would be compatible with adjoining land uses. It would be sensitive to the environment. It would be connected but not intrusive to neighbors. It would be coordinated with the Three Rivers Park District and 9 Mile Creek Regional Trail, and that it would also be coordinated with the 9 Mile Creek Watershed District. The timeline, as we proposed to the City Council, was that they would approve a consultant contract on April 22nd. On June 2nd, we would start the public input process. On August 12th, we would have our first official check-in with the park board. On October 14th, the park board would provide review and recommendation to the plan. And October 21st, the City Council would review and make final approval of the proposed plan. The project outcome would provide a final report, including project findings, recommendations, and master plan graphics, and it would also include cost estimates for renovations. And then the next step that would occur after that would be to take the next level of a master plan and create some construction documents from that. So at the April 22nd City Council, they approved a process, this is what we asked of the City Council on April 22nd. We asked them to approve a process for a reuse study and visioning for a master plan for Fred Richards Golf Course, including authorization of a professional consulting services proposal for Schoenbauer Consulting. And they authorized consulting services for Schoenbauer Consulting for a reuse and visioning study for Fred Richards. So the next steps are June 2nd, a kickoff meeting with staff, park board, and City Council. And our first public meeting will be held on June 12th. I don't have a time yet. I'm anticipating it might be 7 o'clock in the evening, and we will be hosting that at the Public Works Building. All Edina residents are welcome and invited. We will do a very significant mailing regarding this public meeting. We intend to send a mailing out from essentially Highway 62 down to 77th Street, extending east to France Avenue and extending west to Highway 100. And we will also go through our normal publication publicity through the communications department. So what I'm hoping this evening is, first of all, to answer any questions that you might have, and then also gauge any interest. With that June 2nd meeting, we will be asking for some park board members to come and provide some initial input. We obviously, as part of this meeting, we need to keep it under a quorum amount. So if you would express interest to me, at some point, or to Dan at some point, so when it comes time to setting up that meeting, I might know some members that might be interested, and at that point we can determine who might be available and handle that meeting in that manner.
What time is the meeting scheduled for?
We don't have it set up yet. I hope to I hope to get that set up sometime within the next week.
I have a question about forming public opinion about this, because as a new park board member, I've heard quite a bit about Fred Richards, and as a realtor, I've heard quite a bit about it from very concerned citizens, and it's a question that comes up across our organization where I work. As part of this plan, how are we communicating back out to the public what's being talked about and what's coming? Because there's a lot of misinformation out there across the board, and I think that this process is a really good one. So how do we, as part of this plan, are we considering how we're getting the information back out to everyone, so it's not just coming in, but going back out again?
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to rely on our communications department very heavily to, I should say our communications department and also our consultant, I'm sure will have ideas. For a project that we recently did on 54th Street, our consultant set up a website so that we were constantly sending and receiving information that way. I think there's a wide variety of ways. We will certainly be doing a lot of mailings to homes in that neighborhood. We're going to do the first one about the first public meeting, but we will continue to send out mailings, and we will use all of the resources that we have as a city, including press releases, website, all of the email, social media, all of the typical types of, I can assure you we will do everything that we can possible to get the information out to residents.
And so, besides the very end, the very last site, is there any other role for the park board in this?
We will, one of the first things that we'll be doing with a consultant is a very significant stakeholder identification. And obviously the park board is going to be a very significant stakeholder, one of the most significant stakeholders in this process. The council has not asked that we set up a task force or have certain members of the park board involved in the process. But I will be keeping you all up to date as to every meeting, every open house, every site walk. So the park board will be able to participate very significantly in that process. And then we'll be able to provide review and comment on at least 2 occasions. And if the park board requests, we can have more frequent meetings with the park board as well.
Sorry, I have another question about input for the consultant itself, because going back to the question about the 2006 survey and reading through that, there is a lot of really good information in there on specific what people in Edina were looking for that is completely applicable to this particular project. And will that be part of the input for how they're developing the overall vision?
We will absolutely provide them all of the surveys, comprehensive study, everything that we have in our arsenal right now to get them up to speed as to what we have currently, most certainly.
And if I can ask a question, it's concerning stakeholders and aspirations and whatnot for this. It's a unique property. I think it's a special opportunity we have. And is there an avenue to engage not necessarily the obvious stakeholders of the citizens of Edina, but maybe outside of that, the Hennepin County, the greater Twin City area, anything like that, where we can share some ideas, or is there any way to have some discussions with some of those folks?
Absolutely, and that will be part of the stakeholder identification to figure out those folks that we need to have those conversations with, most certainly.
So, and where does the budget fit into all of this? Since this wasn't part of, the reuse wasn't part of any of our even on our 5-year budget, so I'm just wondering how that fits in.
The budget for the study or the budget for repurposing? Honestly, we have not had that conversation. I'm not sure where a budget for repurposing would come from at this point.
And is that part of what the consultants would be proposing?
They would not necessarily provide revenue sources for us. They would help us to put together a budget that we would need to create that park. Certainly, we would have a conversation about any partners that we might be able to bring in, whether it be Three Rivers Park District or the 9 Mile Creek Watershed District. They certainly would be able to provide us with opportunities to help us with funding sources along those lines for a partnership for the park, certainly.
All right, I think that's it, Ann. Thank you for your presentation.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah. All right, the next item is the 2014 Park Board Work Plan and Projects. It's a discussion item, so it's open for a little bit of review and discussion, and it's a very busy time, busy year, a lot going on, as we are all aware of. So I think as we look at this, if I can ask everyone, if there's something on here that they think is not getting attention, maybe it's something that they're looking to be more involved with, that maybe we talk about how we can get you involved, and maybe we need to set up a committee, maybe we need more staff time, I don't know, but that should be part of the discussion, is if there's something like that it's slipping and not getting the attention that you think it deserves, that we need to talk about how we can make that, maybe you can take a role in making that happen.
Well, is this in any order of priority? The listing? Like, is the last item the last on the priority list?
Louise, the items are not prioritized on the work plan.
And at the last time that this board discussed different initiatives, for example, the green initiatives, we talked about rolling those into the strategic plan. So that was going to be part of that. Now, as we discuss what is going to be part of the strategic plan, we may find that some of those initiatives are too detailed, and so we may feel that that's not something that we would be rolling necessarily into the strategic plan to the detail that I remember when we discussed the green initiatives, it was that we would be working with Energy and Environment Commission to identify some shared goals, and yet really as it should be part of our strategic plan to include that as a set part of our project and our vision. So as far as that goes, I wonder if we want to continue talking about that. We can talk about that at the committee when we meet to see how that would fit in. That's what I would propose for that.
I think that's an excellent point, Ellen. I hadn't thought about that, but some of these, because we talk about how can we have so many concurrently operating items, but that's a way to deal with it. Some can need to go and progress onward, but some can be talked about, discussed, and at least covered somewhat satisfactorily in the short term with putting them into the plan, so the master plan.
One, specifically, the enterprise facilities appear to be excluded on the strategic planning process. We haven't started the cost recovery goals for enterprise facilities, but I think that's an important conversation. I think we need to give that some priority, and we need to get a subcommittee put together on that. So, we're in May. Our next meeting is not till June. We haven't touched that one yet.
Is that something, David, you think would be?
I just took on Braemar.
No. I'm not going there. but I can see your sensitivity to that. No, is that something that some of these maybe can be flushed, and I don't want to put too much on the committee, but there's some experienced players in that committee for the strategic plan, but some of these things could be further flushed because I don't know how much of that strategic master plan, if any, is going to deal with the enterprise, and or do we want to separate that up and have a discussion and say this is what that portion of it's going to be covered this way, but we need to have a group looking at something else. Yeah.
Well, I'm just going off of the documents we have on the strategic plan at this point from Ann and that we're looking at, but it does seem like the strategic plan is not dealing directly with the enterprise facilities. I think we've got studies on all of them. I think it needs to be pulled together. I think it really could be a nice, tight, separate undertaking and really trying to see, because you know what, if we can figure out a way to get the cost recoveries up, the budget looks a heck of a lot better. On a lot of these, particularly on the golf course and some of the other pieces. And so I think it is one that's manageable and that, you know, we could actually make progress on and you know, could provide some benefit.
But I think you're working under the assumption that we need to get more cost recovery at our enterprise facilities, and I think the conversation still needs to be had about whether or not we need to, and unless we look at park budget and open up some opportunities, I don't know how we're going to change either classification of these enterprise facilities or lower the cost recovery goals, or, you know, the money has to come from somewhere. So that's where I feel like that conversation needs to be had at some point, and that's more strategic planning.
This may go hand in hand with that a little bit, but one of the items that are on here that I'm unfamiliar with is the initiative around fundraising for Parks and Recreation. As a committee, I know that we've got a member assigned to it, but I would like to, if we are looking to volunteer for ways that we can help out, would love to be a part of that. And I know some of the this week's communications that we've received from residents talks a little bit about off-leash and collecting the fees and using those fees as well, also as a avid dog park user in Edina, and utilizing some of the collars and seeing people who use and don't use them and so forth. That might be a nice tie-in, because I know a lot of the dog walkers themselves tend to be pretty enterprising with regards to fundraising as well. So I know in my previous life that's been a kind of a nice combination. I don't know if that makes sense to the rest of the board, but I'd like to volunteer for helping out with that committee.
Well, we could start working on that. If anyone, I mean, I agree. It is something that we have not done as a park board before, and there's certainly a lot of opportunities. So I would be willing to kick that off with your, now that I have somebody to work with.
Wonderful.
And question, so we can add Member Downing to that committee, it makes a committee of two. Is that something where it needs to go under the direction of staff, is to, you know, set meeting times, or is that something they can do, set their own course?
I think that's something that you can do on your own if you'd like. If you'd like staff assistance, we'd be happy to help.
And just from a sort of an updating us process, the Arneson Acres Master Plan, we appointed a committee. It has quite a number of people. Is that moving ahead, or where does that stand? And then also I was interested in the Wooddale Park barrier-free playground equipment. I know that that's one that's sort of a placeholder as we wait to see if there's going to be a matching grant, and I'm just wondering if there's been any movement on that, or is that still just a placeholder?
It still is a placeholder. There has been no movement on the Wooddale barrier-free playground equipment. And I'm sorry, your other
the
item.
Arneson Acres.
Arneson Acres, I apologize. And regarding Arneson Acres, my interpretation from the last park board meeting in January when we talked about it was the board was interested in holding off on that project at least until later this year, once the master plan for the park system was underway. So as a staff, we have held off on starting any work on that master plan. I guess I'd be interested if that's the way the board is still feeling about the Arneson Acres master plan.
Probably does make sense if we're thinking of doing a master plan, not to have too many pieces getting out ahead of the master plan. And then one other question, the Pamela Park athletic field renovation, I assume that's almost complete, so that's sort of off our list now, even though it's still here?
Yep, that is correct, Member Sella. That project is out for bid currently, so I don't think that there's anything else that the park board, hopefully, unless we run into some major glitch, there should be nothing else that the park board would need to act on that matter.
Can we get back to the Arneson? I'd like to clarify something about Arneson Acres, though, because I'm not sure. I understand part of the budget for that was coming from the Garden Council.
Actually, the entire budget was coming from the Garden Council for that.
Okay, and so were there any strings attached as far as timing?
Not that they have mentioned to me. I know that they are very anxious to get that project underway. They really wanted to get that project underway at the very beginning of this year. Actually, they wanted to start it at the end of last year. So
Right.
I do know that they are very interested in getting that started as soon as possible.
Right, and I think that I'm just wondering, as far as staff time, if this is a project, that type of project would require staff time. And is it possible from a staff perspective that you would have time to devote to the Arneson Acres master plan?
It would be very difficult. I'll be quite honest. Susan was going to be our staff person that was going to be taking that one on, and she's currently the general manager at Braemar Golf Course, in addition to the assistant director. So at this point, with taking on the Braemar master plan, the Fred Richards master plan, the Park System master plan, to take on another master plan would be really tough.
I was thinking that would be what you'd say. So I think I'd propose having someone speak to them and see if we could postpone that until after staff has some openings.
I would very much appreciate that direction from the park board, and I would like to have that conversation with the Garden Council, because it is such a generous offer from them to make that donation for us to do the master plan for that park. I think it's not only generous, but it's incredibly needed to provide direction to them for that park. And yeah, we definitely need to get back to them on that.
So that just leaves the Urban Forest Task Force report that we haven't talked about. Is that something that we would roll into our comprehensive master plan, or is that just I guess I don't know the scope. Is that just something somebody has to read and figure out if it applies to us, or what does that involve?
I've read that report quite closely, and I would like to serve on that item, but I will need some direction from staff, and I'd be willing to run with it with some direction.
That'd be great. Thank you. And we'll just need to coordinate that with the Energy and Environment Commission and see where they are on that as well.
Okay.
I just had to make the comment that combined the master plan consultant for Braemar, the consultant for Fred Richards, and the Arneson Acre master plan, although the funding is coming from different places, together they're more than our parks master plan for the entire department. So, and I know you've advocated for the strategic plan, but you got to put your money where your priorities are, and I'm just kind of astounded looking at the dollars tonight.
And what's your take on the cost recovery goals for the enterprise facilities? Is that something, how would you like to see that tackled, or what would be the most effective way?
That's a good question. You know, we've been working very hard with our enterprise managers and studies of our enterprise operations to do the best that we can to improve our cost recovery percentages at all of our facilities. I guess what I envisioned for this, based on what I've heard from the park board so far, would be a committee of park board members that maybe would meet individually with our facility managers and help to provide insight and direction to the park board and from the park board to help guide us in our next round of business plans. To, I think, just help to improve the understanding both ways, what the park board expects of the facilities, and to maybe help with the education of the park board as to some of the expenses, programmings, operations at the different enterprises. I think that the city council would be very interested in hearing and seeing a report from the park board on what the park board feels is an expected or feasible cost recovery percentage for our individual enterprise operations.
Will you be working on getting information from like other community? I'm assuming you'll want to benchmark it, although we have several reports already. Would you be helping with that, or?
Our facility manager certainly would be able to assist with that. I think in a lot of our cases, we provide very unique types of facilities, so to compare apples to apples might be difficult. Even in terms of an ice arena, there are not many arenas that have 3 sheets of ice going on 4, but we certainly can provide some tangible information that would be helpful.
Has the city council ever given us any direction or staff any direction along those lines as to, are they looking to have guidelines maybe, or has there been any discussion as to what they might be looking for?
Nothing specific that I've heard, but I can certainly try to get some more specifics along those lines as to what information they might feel would be helpful in helping them to make decisions going forward.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it in several different capacities, and I'm not sure where to go with that one. But if we can get some concrete or whatever, you can get more specific information from them, then I think we can move forward more focused. All right. Well, that was a discussion item, so I think if no one has anything else to say along those lines, we can move forward here. Moving on to the next section, which is correspondence and petitions. We all had something in our packet on the council updates and other correspondence and the Veterans Memorial Committee. Unless anyone have anything to say on those items? No? Then we can move on to the chair and board member comments.
Can I ask what the status is with the contract with the Wild?
They still have not responded to the lease agreement that we put forward, so we're patiently waiting. We do hear that they're still interested, but we just haven't heard back yet.
Yeah, probably. Busy, yes. All right. So chair and board member comments. I think I've made all the comments I'm going to. And then we have staff comments. So anything you have prepared there?
Actually, I have a comment.
Yeah, you do? Okay.
Yeah. And in your packet, you'll see that I wrote a letter to council. And it's something that I would like to bring up. There's a couple pieces that I'd like to bring up. One is that I served on the Grandview Steering Committee for 2 years, And the park board then had a representative, and that was me, and we worked out a fairly detailed framework, which was to provide a vision for what could happen with the plot of land, the former public works site. I don't know if, I'm not sure how familiar you all are with that. And after it was approved, the council had directed the park board to handle the next step, which would be to address the community needs, the use of public spaces and civic building program, which would drive building needs. And we were not directed to do that. We were given a seat on the community as a part of the CAT, which is the Community Advisory Team. And we have Sue Jacobson as our representative. And in doing that, she has been representing the board, but has not been able to discuss what's been going on with Grandview. And actually, I just was bringing this up because on the 20th, the council is going to be voting on the next steps for implementation. And we have been asked not to talk about this because it's up to the city council. Philosophically, there's two approaches to the next step, and I want to commend Sue for representing the park board with her vote, which states that they would recommend that a consultant, an unbiased consultant, would pursue what community needs would be. That was going with the majority of the other members of that committee, the Citizen Advisory Committee. And so I want to thank her for that vote. I agree with her, and I agree with the other members of that committee. And so I wanted to just make sure that other people were aware that the City Council is voting on how the next step on how to handle that public land. The other side, there were two members of the committee that had decided that they would prefer partnering with a developer as the next step. And so if anyone else is concerned about that, they should be talking with the City Council. And so I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. There's several items in our comprehensive plan that talks about public use of public lands and the potential needs for the future. And I think that we should be very careful with how we handle public land. And so that would be my point here now. And this next step, it appears that the park board is not going to be able to comment. So I just wanted to comment and thank Sue for representing at least my perspective. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ellen. I would suspect as time goes through that some of those issues, and I hope that some of the Grandview discussion revisits the park board. Unfortunately, not at this time. So, staff comments.
Thank you. I have just a few things to mention. First of all, just a reminder that this Saturday from 10 until noon is the National Kids to Parks Day celebration at Roslyn Park. So if you have any free time and are available to stop over, we would love to see you there. The community garden is open for planting. It was a tough spring for us to get that up and running, but we are open to the gardeners. Last week, we had our groundbreaking celebration at the Sports Dome, so thank you to those of you that were able to attend that. I know it was in the middle of the day, so it was a tough time for people to get over there, but it was a fun event, and it was really nice to see so many folks that played a big part in making that happen, including the park board, so thank you for that. Today we dedicated 2 softball scoreboards at Pamela Park. That was a fun event. Centennial Lakes Park is open for the season. Everything is operational there, from the paddle boats to the croquet and lawn games area. So that is a sure sign of summer. And speaking of summer, the Aquatic Center will be opening on Saturday, June 7th. It seems early, but I won't be seeing you again as a board prior to that date. And one other big thing that'll be happening prior to me seeing you at the next park board meeting is later this month we will be opening our second major bid package, second and final bid package for the Sports Dome and outdoor rink projects at Braemar. And we'll also be opening the Pamela site work bid package. And I will be asking the City Council to, hopefully, if everything comes in good, I'll be asking the City Council on June 3rd to approve those projects so we can continue moving forward with the Sports Dome and Pamela Park renovations. So we do have a lot going on right now. It's all really good stuff. Thank you.
It is all really good stuff. There was a few of us at the Sports Dome ceremony there last week, and is it ever enjoyable to see something like that come to culmination and actually break ground? That's fun. So thanks to everyone who had anything to do with that. There was a lot of work involved with that. All right, seeing as there's no other items on the agenda, I move to adjourn the meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned.